Hey, we're live.
It says
We're
live.
live. Welcome, everyone. Today we're chatting with Tony Geraci, aka Cafeteria Man. We're also excited to have Erin joining us, who is a food advocate from North Carolina. And I'm Karen, a mom from Pennsylvania who also works for Moms Rising. We're really excited to have you joining us today. This conversation is hosted by Moms Rising's Good Food Force, which is a group of moms, parents, and community members who take action in their schools, communities, and online to advocate for healthier kids and families. And it couldn't be more timely, as right now our kids are in the height of the back-to-school season. As a bit of background, Tony is featured in the documentary Cafeteria Man, which chronicles an ambitious effort to green the public school diet serving 83,000 students in Baltimore, and later over 200,000 students in Memphis. Over the course of several years, the film traces efforts to make healthy, nutritious meals available to all of the city's students. Viewers watch as inner city youth plant and harvest vegetables at the school system's 33-acre teaching farm, which is now a national model. They also witness what it takes to get local produce on school plates. And they watch as high school seniors develop practical job skills through a new citywide culinary vocational training program. So let's get started. Erin, why don't you introduce yourself and kick it off with the first question for Tony?
Sure. Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Erin. I am the director of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council here in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I'm also the mom to 5 kids, 4 of whom are in our public schools. So I see things from a couple different angles, so as a mom and then as a food advocate here. Tony, really seeing your movie, seeing Cafeteria Man a year ago as a Moms Rising event inspired me to really embrace this school food movement. So what inspired you to get better school lunches for your students when you were in Baltimore?
So, first of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, I think the thing that inspired me was I'm a parent. I have 3 kids, and I had been a professional chef and restaurateur most of my life, born and raised in New Orleans, so it was always about food for me, good food. And my kids would come home and they would tell me about serve, and I thought, well, this is not that hard, it can be changed. And I actually took the job as a food service director, school district that I raised my kid, my friend said, look, the thing that kept my kids involved was the fact that they prepared it, that they were part of the conversation around the food, right? So I was born and raised in New Orleans, up a nightclub on Bourbon Street, so I might have been better off being raised by wolves. I mean, my parenting reference points are pretty thin. But the one thing that my family always did was we cooked. So I started doing that with my own kids, and 3 nights a week we ate together as a family. If you needed to bring 20 of your buddies with you, that's fine, but we're eating together as a family, and that we dined together. One of my kids was responsible for that meal, what the contents were, how we were going to source it. And it became this like incredible family, opportunity where my kids, quite honestly, got a little competitive around the meals, coming up with these really amazing meals, but they also became really conscious of where food comes from, that it's not just from a package from some and as they started meeting local farmers and people that produce food, they forged relationships with those people that you can't get at Safeways, a major shopping center. And it changed the way that I looked at food, that I had some preconceived will or will not do.
That's great. Tony, some of the people watching will have seen the film, but for those who haven't, give us a summary of what you succeeded in changing in Baltimore.
Sure. So I'm to Baltimore City, Maryland, to a program. 3,000 kids there, and they were maybe 8,500 kids. The food, everything about it, horrible. Everybody understood that in order for that they needed to have kids that could pay attention in class, and I was really fortunate that the superintendent Doc was understood that hungry kids cannot learn. Period. All right, and he wanted to do something about that. So we started a really aggressive breakfast in the classroom program, and I created these little breakfast boxes, and it had the lowest sugar cereal on the market, 100% juice, a whole grain snack, no dyes, no preservatives, and the boxes had some fun facts and stuff, and there was like also a little secret code on the box, and the idea was you got your box, you looked for the code, and if you had the winning code number, you won like hats or jerseys or iPads or all kinds of stuff. So the idea was to get kids sort of interested in the box. Eventually, they would start eating the contents of the box, and then eventually things would change. Kids would start paying attention, and we went from serving like 8,300 kids a day to like 45,000 kids a day for breakfast every day, which had this trickle effect in teaching that now kids were showing up to school on time. They were getting meals. We had a lot of pushback from teachers. We had a lot of pushback from community. I went to Catholic schools as a kid, and I secretly lusted after the hall monitor sash. It was an outward sign of nobility and respect, something I did not have. So what we started doing was we had our breakfast monitors. Right, so these kids would help to bring the food into the classroom, pick up the rosters, of kids who have eaten or who have not eaten, and help with the teachers to make this happen. Well, eventually what happened was the youngest kids couldn't wait to be older kids so they could run the breakfast program, and it became part of the school culture that we're sitting down, we're having breakfast. So, and teachers embraced it in that, okay, have you eaten? Have you not eaten? Now it's time to start the lesson plan. When kids would show up late for school, the first thing that we did was we fed them before we put them in class, because often if you have a kid that's hungry and you put them in a classroom, they're fidgety, they become disruptive, it becomes disruptive for everybody, nobody learns, nobody wins. So let's just do the simple things. As a parent, I know when my kids were hungry, they were a handful, Awesome. So why wouldn't somebody else's kids be the same? So I did all of this stuff based on my knowledge and experience as a parent, that you just kind of started like that. And, eventually it changed. Then the city had this abandoned property. It was an abandoned orphanage, and it was founded by a former slave, George Bragg. And, he understood that his people were never going to experience freedom, real freedom, until they had economic freedom. So he wanted to create a place where young men and women could come to and learn some skills, usable skills that were transferable, that they could get jobs, right? So in the process, this is in Baltimore. It's right on Route 40. If you get a chance, stop there. It's called the Great Kids Farm. It's amazing. It's a national model now. But it was it had these beautiful old stone buildings and slate roofs, but everything was overgrown, everything was dilapidated and falling apart. But you could just feel the energy of this place, you know. And I just really felt that this was like a moment in time that I was brought to sort of do something about. And with a group of these kids, and the kids that originally founded that orphanage were the kids that built the buildings, quarried the rocks, the stone, planted the orchards, did all of that stuff. So I thought the best way to do this is kids again. So started with a small group of kids and some volunteer parent organizations, very much like Moms Rising, and we created a national model around what food is about. And the idea was to be able to start growing food that we could use in our cafeterias, but also start teaching our kids some job skills that were transferable. And you know, urban agriculture is huge and it's booming and it's a great industry. We were able to then put hoop houses up, these portable greenhouses around the city. In fact, the National Aquarium gave us 8 acres of land, and then they told us that it was brownfield. That's why they gave it to us, because they didn't want to deal with it. But our model works really well because we lay a polymer shield down on the ground, cover it with organic soil, build the hoop houses around it so you have clean organic production and food from day one on otherwise unusable toxic land. And it became this great model. And we started using kids there as contract croppers. You know, they would grow specific things for us, but they would have a percentage of the hoop that was theirs. They could grow whatever they wanted to grow with it. And I was just in Baltimore a couple of weeks ago, and there's a kid who was one of my graduates. He grew herbs in his hoop house. Now he's the pesto man in Baltimore. And at the Waverly Market, he sells all of his pesto concoctions. You know, he makes about $65,000 a year for a kid that grew up in the hood with no college education and just loving it and doing a really amazing thing. And he mentors other kids to do this thing. So it's a business for him, and that's always been a driver for me, was not just to connect the food to nutrition and health, but connect it to a way that you could you know, have a living around it and share with other people. So that's the Baltimore thing, and it grew, and it got so big that I was asked to come to Memphis and replicate that. And in Memphis, you know, they wanted to do it big. So we had over 100 acres of, you know, our own production, a giant central kitchen that we, you know, prepared, you know, our food. We always employed about 50 students year-round. You know, so we partnered with the CTE program, which is the Career Technology and Education programs, and made those connections that, like, there's good work, there's good living, and good food to be had if you're willing to step up and be part of it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. There
are so many similarities for us in Charlotte, with Charlotte, Baltimore, and Memphis. The work we're doing with food classes, the urban farming, like you say. So we feel like we have a lot to learn from what you've done. So thank you.
Well, you know, all of this stuff is scalable and transferable, and that's the beautiful thing about it. And there are people all around the country that are doing similar things and at it. And I've always been a big fan of don't, you know, try to create the wheel, but try to recreate some positive things.
So true. I took my camera off just to help with the bandwidth, the speed of the cameras, so I apologize. I'm here if people hear a voice. I'm behind the Moms Rising logo. But Erin, do you want to take it away with the next question about transportation?
We have 145,000 students or so, 160 schools, and when we've worked with our child nutrition services, one of the questions they raise with us is transportation. So how do we transport this food school to school? How do we, if we're going to try to get more fresh, healthy local food in, they see that as a big barrier. Was that a barrier for you? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Well, look, it's a perceived barrier, all right? So, so the reality is they're transporting food right now, all right? So food shows up at their school every day, kids eat every day, it's all, so the infrastructure is already in place. So what you have to do is you just have to apply the existing infrastructure with what your vision is. I happen to know the food service director at the Charlotte Mecklenburg district, and they were very similar in the sense that they went through this giant public school merger. Memphis did the same thing. It was the largest public school merger in American history. So there is a lot of stuff going, a lot of moving parts in Charlotte, in that you've got like these really strong sort of urban education centers in Charlotte, but you also have the suburbs and the country sort of mixed and merged together, right? So you have to figure out a way to make that work. I know that in Charlotte you have a lot of your own kitchens, standalone kitchens, and the majority, if my memory serves correctly, are pretty well equipped. So we did a couple of things around food preparations that we tried to localize stuff. And what works well in the beginning is you have to start somewhere. So I'm a big fan of pilots. So because pilots give you an opportunity to figure it out without causing gridlock for the entire district. So what I did in Memphis and in Baltimore both was I took regional locations and started deliveries there, and then just sort of clustered out the food distribution until I could get to a place where I could figure out my own transportation needs. And as it worked in Baltimore, my local produce company that I was purchasing stuff from were more than happy to work with me, working with local farmers, picking up there and dropping stuff off. We used kind of a model of GAP certification. GAP certification is not the law in all states. In some states it is, but GAP just means good agriculture practices, all right? So everybody understands that. And most reputable farmers that you're working with are already using good agricultural practices. They're not, using contaminants and pesticides and things like that. So you just kind of work within the confines of your community. One of my best partners ever, and still are like the local Department of Agriculture. The Secretary of Agriculture for the state of Maryland, Buddy Hance is his name. Really amazing guy. He really worked with me to connect farms that could grow specific stuff for my needs at the schools. We arranged for some tax credits for some of those farmers because they were selling produce to us at a lower cost than they would do it at a retail market. So it was very flexible, and I know that the Secretary of Agriculture in South Carolina is pretty proactive around this kind of stuff. So that may be a conversation that you might want to have, and some local farmers. But transportation can be an issue. But if you're getting food to your schools right now, then you can get better food to your schools right now. So it's just changing the way you're doing it.
Okay, that's awesome. I love the idea of pilots too. I think
Yeah.
pilots make a lot of sense for and it seems like such a simple thing to think about, but presenting it as a pilot, we're not trying to change 160 schools at the same time, but let's look at a couple and run a pilot. Love that idea.
Yeah, yeah, and it gives people an opportunity to get comfortable with it, and it's been my experience that if people experience success, that they're more willing to experience things that they haven't tried before. You just have to feed them a little success.
Yeah, that's great. And GAP is the law in North Carolina, but speaking of pilots, I do have an urban farm at Geringer High School in Charlotte that is starting this week working on their GAP certification.
Oh,
so
that's
the high schoolers that are growing the food can potentially get that food into their own cafeteria,
right.
Because it will be GAP certified. So
Yeah.
stay tuned. Hopefully that'll be a big story.
And there's no rules against buying your own food. So what we did in Memphis, so if you understand the rules, you can sort of bend them to make them work for you. So what we did was, so with local purchasing and with farm to school, school districts are allowed to purchase local food, and they can pay higher price. They can pay 5% more than what they normally pay, 10% more than what they normally pay for the same items if it's local, because you're like you're specifically doing it as a mandate of local purchasing. And what we found was, by working with the existing distribution network that was in place, like the produce distributors, a lot of those people are already buying local stuff, but they're not advertising it as local. So what we did was we did a whole, campaign around local foods. Today's collard greens are brought to you by the Jones Farm, and today's peaches are brought to you by Bogger's Farm, and that kind of thing. And we started bringing in farmers so kids could actually sort of meet them, and it changes the game. But you have to, it's that personal contact, I think, that changes it. Again, our children are desensitized to human interaction. I mean, they really are.
Yeah.
We surround them with a lot of stuff and not so much touch and love.
Thank you.
So helpful. Thank you. Tony, I have a question for you. Where would a mom or a parent get started to make some of these changes happen in their own school? Is it with the school board, finding champions within the school? Like, what would you recommend to somebody like me who wants to get involved in seeing their child's school become healthier and doesn't really know where to start?
Sure. I think all of the above. So here's the thing. Often educators like balk at it. You would think educators would be open to new ideas all the time, right? It's been my experience that in the education area, people are locked into like their old sort of ideas about how things work. It's a comfort zone thing, and I think that you have to seek out the champions in your schools. There may be a teacher, there may be a kid, a janitor, a bus driver, somebody in that school is enthusiastic and are willing to kind of do the work and like align yourself. So collaboration is a huge tool for success. You cannot do this stuff by yourself. You've got to have collaborators. You've got to have partners along the way. And part of that partnering and collaboration is about like understanding some of the issues that food service directors or school districts face around food, and recognize that, and then take one step at a time. Take one perceived problem and find a solution for that one problem. All right, don't try to sort of fix everything, but start with one thing, and simple thing like the peaches, right? So in Baltimore, I could get commodity USDA canned peaches, that traveled from Washington State, and they cost me about 14 cents a portion, right? With commodity stuff, I could buy local peaches from a local farm for under a dime a piece. So what made more sense, So you have to start not just rationalizing it, but you have to sort of lay it out on paper for people to understand the economic impact of this. And then you talk about things like, for every dollar that we can spend locally, it's going to flip 5 times before it leaves town. So in Baltimore, our first year, the goal was $1 million. I wanted to spend $1 million, and this was with a $56 million budget. All right, I want to spend $1 million of local stuff because I knew that had a $5 million economic impact in my community. All right, so and my first year, it was really difficult to spend $1 million because I didn't have farmers that got all that stuff, right? They want to sell me this beautiful sort of farm stand glossy produce, and I'm telling them, well, I'm going to chop that stuff up and turn it into a coleslaw or a salad or a soup or something like that. So I don't need this beautiful stuff that you're selling to retail. I can use all of this other stuff that maybe you don't have a market for. So we started talking about that kind of stuff, and as it worked out, the farmers really benefited from an outlet that they had this produce that in many cases they give away, right? It started working, and my kids got fresh produce. My kids got fresh peaches. My kids got peaches that there were kids that had never tasted a fresh peach before in their lives, and just blew me away that was possible here in this country. And so it's slow beginnings. You just have to sort of build on it like that. But find every collaborator you can. Show up to school board meetings, talk about if there's food issues. I am shameless about showing up with 30 or 40 kids, because they can tell me I'm a jerk or no, but, you work for these guys, and this is what they want, So, yeah, the power of children is pretty strong. I think the Cafeteria Man film demonstrated that as well, that a small group of kids could just change the entire culture of a school if they chose to, and that that empowerment and helping kids to find that voice is pretty strong stuff. It's amazing. And then at some point it becomes like their train that they're riding, and you're just helping to put coal in the locomotive.
Right. That's great. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Tony, I want to tell you that we screened your film, a couple weeks ago, and we had over 200 students, and it was really at the prompting of our students when we met with local students, and we said, what are your hot topics? What are your issues you want to talk about? Anything. And they said, school food. We want to talk about school food and school gardens and school lunch. And so we put this together, and we ended up with over 200 people. We had a cook-off after the show talking about school lunch, cooking with sweet potatoes. So awesome, I have to tell you, it was fantastic. So thank you. Your movie was really the impetus for it, and it was enjoyed by a large group here in Charlotte.
Well, I'll tell you, those kids were really sort of the power behind that. I just when Allison testified before Congress in the film, that was the first time in American history that a child got to testify before Congress about a law that directly affected them. And I think that speaks volumes about in the last 8 years where the government is going with this thing. I have to say that in the last 8 years, probably the USDA has done more positive stuff than they've done in their inception, right, in the history of that agency. And it all boils down to this. We cannot be a great nation unless we have great kids, unless we have healthy kids, unless we have a healthy country that is more conscious of what they're putting in their bodies. Because look, hungry kids don't learn, and when I say hungry kids, I don't mean like kids that aren't eating anything, because like a lot of our kids eat crap all day long. They're still hungry, all right? They're not getting the nutrients that they need for their bodies to grow, and like they are these constantly evolving, changing little machines, and they need the right fuel, period, all the time. Nutrition is important at every stage of life, and it's critically important at this stage of life if we want our kids to be successful, and they can't if they're not absorbing the lesson plan. This is real simple stuff for me,
Yeah, absolutely. So many good nuggets I can take and absolutely incorporate into my own life, my own like family life, and then also how I engage with my school.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that has made my program successful is, look, I'm like, I believe in choice, right? And I believe that you can eat anything that you want to eat, but there are some consequences of eating too much of some things, and just be aware of that. I know this kid, Erin, who, she probably eats 5,000 calories a day, but she also runs, 15 miles a day, so, she's burning that stuff off. And I'm constantly amazed that she can eat the stuff that she eats, but she's, a healthy kid. But I think that you have to just be aware of that, and I think that you have to be willing to try new things. I had this thing called the no thank you bite, right? So it's real simple. Right?
You do that. That's it's very useful. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the serving line, like, I'd have these little paper Solo 1 ounce cups lined up, and they would be full of like fruits, vegetables, entrees, whatever I was trying to hustle, whatever I was trying to get the kids to try. And you could have as many of these as you wanted. The deal was you just had to try it. You didn't have to like it. All right. So when you tried it, if you didn't like it, it was no thank you, and you tossed it in the trash, and that's good. But if you tried something, we would put like a little gold star next to your name. So every classroom had their own roster, right? And then at the end of the month, I would have a constellation party with all my stars, right? Kids that tried new stuff. And I would ask them questions like, well, why did you want to try that? Or what did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Was it the color? Was it the texture? Was it the flavor? What would you do differently? What would you put in that cup that maybe I haven't thought about? And now I'm getting real input and real information from my clients. I work for these thousands of children, right? And if I'm not listening to what they're saying, then what kind of a job am I doing, right? So through that interaction, so it's non-threatening, it's non-judgmental, you can choose to love carrots or not. It's okay, but you chose to try it. You chose to do something like that. And then I then was able to develop, further develop recipes or complete meals around that. And we did this thing in Conval where, it was, kids were in charge of coming up with, a school lunch, and they had to follow all the guidelines, all the rules, all the regs, just like I did, but they could do anything they wanted to do. So when you sort of let them do that, amazing stuff happens. So there's this organization in Chicago, it's called Cooking Up Change, and they do a phenomenal job. They're in their 10th year now, and they've been doing this around the country. And like as an example, there was the winning team from Los Angeles, right? With these two amazing girls, and they took a lowly fish stick, a simple school lunch fish stick, and they put it in this great corn tortilla and filled it with this jicama, cilantro, jalapeno slaw, and it became this amazing fish taco, right? And they had this great sort of peppery iola on it, and they served it with pigeon peas and rice and twice baked plantains. It was a phenomenal meal. It was a phenomenal meal. But it was a fish stick, and it sort of changed the way that they started looking at things. So how can I take this that already exists in our school and turn it into something that's palatable? So that was kind of the fun thing about it. I stopped buying processed chicken years ago, and I just do whole chicken, and I roast it. And we roast it with pestos or different flavor profiles. I used to own a spice company, so I kind of know a little bit about flavoring and stuff. But it's like good, natural, bone-in kind of stuff. And guess what? No kids choked on bones. Every kid ate the chicken. Apparently, chicken doesn't have to be a nugget for it to be enjoyed. So we found a lot of things. And it kind of changed it, and the kids started calling it the real chicken. Are we having real chicken? As opposed to a patty or a nugget or something like that. It was real, So yeah, that kind of stuff. It's a blast. I thoroughly love the work that I do. As a chef, I'm turned on every time I see somebody try something new, a new flavor, a new experience. It kind of validates, my world, my life. But to see a kid like discover something like that, look, I'm convinced that our hallways are chock full of these young Julia Childs and James Beards that are just waiting for a voice. Look, I didn't get math until I started taking apart recipes. I didn't understand chemistry until I saw bread rise. Those were the voices that spoke to me. And I'm convinced that those are the voices that speak to all of our children, that our children don't learn the same way. They're not in the same box. I think we have to stop teaching a test. I think we have to start encouraging critical thought. I think that we have to start encouraging new experience. I think that we need to start encouraging our kids to test the boundaries, to see what's out there, so they can make informed decisions about who they want to be and what their worlds are about. And if you can't, create an environment of discovery, then I don't think we're doing a good job as parents.
And I love the idea of using the medium of food to do that. And it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Yeah. So we're stealing so many of your ideas, just so you know.
No. Look, the great thing about my ideas is I probably stole them from somebody else. So
okay, perfect. Perfect.
I think that when you start allowing kids to really have honest conversations about how they feel, what they feel, and like you said, provide a medium that works for them, changes the game. It changes the game. I know all of, look, I was a parent. I 2 daughters and a son. I survived the tweens and the teens and all of the other things that go on. That stuff doesn't change. I mean, that's part of parenthood. That's part of being a family. But now my adult children, those little kind of subtle lessons that I sort of stumbled my Forrest Gumped my way through, they incorporate that stuff into their lives, and it's really a blessing to see, and it's cooler when a kid walks up to you and says, yeah, Chef T, those aren't kiwi fruit, they're gooseberries. I don't know if you know that or not. And, kiwi is just a marketing name. Oh, yeah, it's just I'm floored when I hear stuff like that.
That's great. Erin, do you have any final questions for Tony?
Gosh, we've covered so much. Thank you for taking all this time. I guess my one question would be, if there was anything that surprised you the most from all the work and the years you've been in Baltimore and Memphis and working with school food, what surprised you the most, I guess, out of all of this?
I think that I was always fearful that the kids wouldn't get it, right? And in the beginning, and the one thing that I would change, right, was my approach. I spent a lot of time with adults, and it was only once I got their buy-in that I started bringing kids into the conversation. I would do it completely opposite. I would start with the kids. I would get buy-in from all of your kids first, and then show up one night at a school board meeting with 40 kids, and they demand things change. Look, that's what happened in Baltimore. There were a group of kids showed up at the school board meeting, brought school lunch, flipped the tray upside down, nothing fell off, and they said, "You try it." Nobody on the school board wanted to try it, right? Surprise, right? So there's these kids that are just making a valid argument about, look, we're here, 7 to 8 hours a day, and we're kind of a captive audience, and if this is what we get, yeah, we're going to be pissed off. We're going to be angry, and Mom's going to fill my bag full of Cheetos and stuff that I want to have, and it just perpetuates the problem. So I think when you bring kids into the conversation right away and say, what is it that you want, and how do we get there? And look, they're going to come up with some crazy ideas, and just go with that flow a little bit. But you can sort of narrow their focus into a place where they're getting what they want, and like a lot of it had to do with choice. We did like a lot of things were like, these are the entree choices, choose one or two of those, and then, these are the fixings. You can have as much of that as you want. Like I never put limitations on, how much fruit or how much vegetables we had. Like there were always bowls of fresh whole fruit in hallways. When they're testing, when they're doing stuff like that, it's around. You make it part of the culture, you don't make it a stigma, you make it free access, So that would be my best advice, is start with a group of kids first, and I'll tell you that school lunch deal is the coolest thing ever. If you get in touch with the folks at Cooking Up Change, they can give you sort of all the rules and the regs and stuff, and they're just I love those guys. I love them. They've changed school lunch in a lot of districts across America, and I think Charlotte-Mecklenburg is big enough that you would qualify in the national competition.
I'm going to look this up as soon as I get off with you. It sounds perfect for us. It really does.
Yeah. Very, very cool stuff.
Great. Well, this has been a great conversation. I'm super fired up. I'm sure everybody watching this will be as well, to bring these lessons and experiences back to our own schools and communities. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Please check out the film and more about Tony at cafeteriaman.com. You're always welcome to join us on the Good Food Force, which is through Moms Rising. So just go to the MomsRising.org website and look for Good Food Force. That's our community of healthy food advocates, including people like the amazing Erin. Thank you both so much. Thank you to everybody watching, and we're excited to work together to build healthier schools and communities.
All right.
Thanks.
Mr. Greens, you go out and play.
Right.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.